all oaths of office or employment, like those administered in the U.S. military or by the states or even county or city government, always draw a distinction between upholding the laws of the state, as an example, and upholding the Constitution of that state and of the United States, because the power to make laws comes only from our Constitution. It is the most binding, most daunting pledge that any of us never take, because to violate that pledge carries a tremendous penalty. At its most egregious, the penalty of death. This is the pledge that the defendant took upon entering office of the President of the United States. Twice took in that capacity, as a matter of fact, and many times before. Now, this trial, this event in history, has nothing to do with patriotism, yet it has everything to do with being a patriot. It has nothing to do with supporting our troops, as the more than popular bumper stickers urge. Yet it has everything to do with safeguarding them from the unnecessary risk of death. In other words, it is at the heart of supporting the men and women who serve in our armed forces. Some years ago, just prior to our invasion of Iraq in March 2003, we were all chastened to be good patriots and to support our troops as they put their lives on a second front line of battle in our government's quest to rid the world of tyranny, terrorism, and the potential for mass murder. We were told that the now-deceased leader of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, was a man that wished us more than ill, and in fact, preferred to see our country reduced to ashes. And foremost, that he had been developing and harboring weapons capable of delivering such death on a massive scale, thus the term weapons of mass destruction. Shortly thereafter, we all became more than familiar with the acronym WMD. Our former president, George W. Bush, also told us himself and through his intermediaries that Saddam Hussein was a mass murderer responsible for the deaths of, amongst others, perhaps more than 5,000 Kurds through the use of WMDs sometime in the early 1980s. That these Kurdish people had been gassed by Hussein's military in an attempt to eradicate the Kurdish population residing in Iraq. Mr. Hussein apparently considered his Kurdish people troublesome, so much so that their annihilation was preferable to their continued existence. Night after night, as the drumbeat leading towards invasion of Iraq strengthened, the evening news carried footage of these Kurds lying dead and decaying in the streets. It was a horrific sight, and successful in inspiring us to support whatever direction our president might take us. Keep in mind the number of dead Kurds. 5,000. Our government told us that this Hussein character had been and was developing, manufacturing, storing, and potentially deploying a variety of WMDs, and that he was harboring terrorists as well. Fundamentalists bent on launching another large-scale attack, much like and perhaps much worse than the horror that unfolded on September 11, 2001, executed principally by 15 Saudi Arabian nationals and 4 others, none of whom were Iraqi or Afghani, incidentally. In fact, and quite ironically, the more staunchly religious countries, the theocracies surrounding Iraq, disdained Saddam Hussein because of his secular practices, seeing Hussein as nothing more than some godless, despotic, dangerous annoyance. These are the same countries that had waged war against each other for the decades, the centuries preceding our invasion. Very shortly after September 11th and sometime before Iraq, we invaded Afghanistan in our quest to bring the well-documented, if you'll excuse the term, mastermind of the Twin Towers attack to justice, Osama bin Laden, also a citizen of Saudi Arabia, incidentally. Bin Laden's whereabouts were known to be in one or more regions of Afghanistan and/or marginally within the borders shared with Pakistan. So we quickly, as a nation, threw our support nearly unanimously to our government, and we pursued bin Laden. This is the same country, Afghanistan is, that brought the relative might of the Soviet Union to its knees and contributed substantially to the USSR's disintegration, virtually bankrupting the Soviet economy. The people who fought the Soviet communists in Afghanistan for that long, weary decade during the 1980s were those that we armed and trained. They are now the same people that we now battle every day in that country. So, by invading Afghanistan, we embarked on what was certain to be a long and grueling, perhaps winnable, perhaps not battle against a people trained by us and fundamentally opposed to who we are for many reasons. Thereafter, we invaded Iraq. Why? Because we were told by the people that we entrusted to the highest offices of our country that they were the same. Afghanistan equaled Iraq. Osama bin Laden equaled Saddam Hussein. Therefore, Iraq was a terrorist state. At that time, at that moment in history, we were a country still reeling from the graphic and relentless images of death. Giant planes slamming into our hallmarks of American engineering. Explosions of flames. People like you and I, leaping, hands clasped, hundreds of feet to their death, rather than face the certain and agonizing death from the infernos consuming everything within. Pieces of concrete the size of small mountains, crashing hundreds of feet into the streets of New York. Expressions of pain and horror on those sifting through the mountains of rubble. And then, the death toll. First hundreds, then thousands. Americans of every walk of life, of every ethnicity. Financial analysts, janitors, restaurant workers, administrative workers, corporate executives, lawyers, stockbrokers, police officers, a cross-section of just about every American city and of every American. First came extreme grief and pain for nearly every one of us. Nearly immediately after, anger and rage. Then just like shortly after December 7th, 1941, an overwhelming thirst for revenge. That man gave us the means to avenge and assuage our anger, our hate, our bitterness, our very primal thirst for blood, in return from the lives taken from us as a family. And we found ourselves embroiled in battle in Afghanistan, seeking a villain of indescribable vileness. But then, something happened, something strange, and still caught in the moment of grief, that man systematically, knowingly and with willful intent to defraud the American public, manipulated our hate and rage and turned it away from bin Laden and directed it instead towards Iraq, a developed, thriving country of people